Welcome to Indus Special. I am Ejaz Haider. In a biography of the late Mullah Omar, Searching for an Enemy, Betty Dam, a Dutch journalist and writer who's been reporting from Afghanistan since 2006, says Omar never went to Pakistan but stayed in Afghanistan just a few miles from a US military base. The journalist who worked on the biography for more than 5 years has basically put paid to rumors that Omar was in Pakistan and died in Karachi. The book was published in Dutch last month, and a summary of some findings have been translated in English. According to a report in The Guardian, American troops once even searched the house where he was hiding, but failed to find a secret room built for him. This is what the biography claims. The report says the account exposes an embarrassing failure of US intelligence, which put a $10 million bounty on Omar's head after the 9/11 attacks in the US. Officials repeatedly suggested that, like the Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden, he was hiding in Pakistan and died there. It also appends the Taliban's own account of their movement, revealing how Omar handed over practical control of the insurgency to his deputies in 2001, even though they claimed him as leader for the rest of his life and for 2 years after his death in 2013. While statements issued in his name were scrutinized around the world, he was living as a virtual hermit, refusing visits from his family, filling notebooks with jottings in an invented language, and occasionally hiding from US patrols in irrigation tunnels. Meanwhile, in another development, though expectedly, the Kabul government has expressed its deep reservations over talks between Ambassador Zalmay Khalilzad and the Taliban. The National Security Advisor Hamdullah Mohib has accused Khalilzad of playing to his own interests. This was reported by Josh Rogin in a series of tweets on Thursday. And let me just put out these tweets for you. It starts with the National Security Advisor of Afghanistan just told a room full of reporters that US Special Representative Zalmay Khalilzad is trying to, quote, delegitimize the Afghan government, unquote, perhaps so he can take it over for himself. And then Josh says, wow. And the next tweet, he says, Afghan NSA just now on the record. And once again, quoting him, we are told that Ambassador Khalilzad is a great diplomat and he knows what he is doing. I'm not sure I buy that because I think he's ostracizing and alienating a very trusted ally and partner, unquote. And further down in the thread, again quoting Mohib, George says, we think either Ambassador Khalilzad doesn't know how to negotiate and there may be other reasons behind what he's doing. But what he's doing is not getting a deal that would result in peace in Afghanistan, unquote. Further down, and again quoting Mohib, knowing Ambassador Khalilzad's own personal history, he has ambitions in Afghanistan. He wanted to run for president twice. People in government think perhaps all this talk is to create a caretaker government of which he will then become the viceroy, unquote. So these are the tweets, and these tweets quote Mohib directly. So we will discuss the contents of the biography, whatever contents have been put out in the English translation, and also this development where the Kabul government seems to be not really enamored of how and where the talks are going. And I have with me Rupert Stone, who's a journalist based in Berlin. And with him, we have Rahimullah Yousafzai, who has also joined us from Peshawar. Rahimullah Yousafzai, the sense that Mullah Omar had crossed over, lived in hiding in Karachi, died there. And now, obviously, we have this biography which says something totally different.
I think this was bound to come out because there were two different narratives. One was, promoted by different individuals, different countries, that, Mullah Omar had escaped to Pakistan after the fall of Taliban regime, that he was running the Quetta Shura, and that he died in a hospital in Karachi. Taliban had always denied this. They were insisting that he died in Afghanistan, in Zabul. Actually, I had a lot of personal information because I knew Mullah Omar. I had interviewed him many times. And I knew that this person is different, that, he will always try to take his own independent decisions. I won't be surprised if this was the case, that he didn't come to Pakistan after the fall of Taliban government, that he handed over the leadership to Mullah Ubaidullah, that he was the head, he was the Amir al-Mu'mineen of Taliban, but he was not wanting to come to Pakistan. His family did come to Pakistan. His son Mullah Yaqub, his brother Mullah Manan, they were in Pakistan. But I think he, according to many sources, stayed behind. And now the story has come out. It's not written by some Pakistani journalist or writer. It is a Dutch journalist who has been reporting from Afghanistan for years. And now she says she worked on this book for 5 years. I think that, Mullah Omar had, this idea that, that he is leading the Taliban, so he should have an exemplary character, and he should not take orders from anyone. I know from personal experience also that he did not want to be seen as to be associated with Pakistan. He tried to chart his independent course. Of course, he had his difficulties. His party people, his other colleagues had to make compromises because many of them came to Pakistan. They still are here. But I think in his case, we can say that he did not want to come to Pakistan. Even earlier, we had this claim that he studied at the Darul Uloom Haqqaniya in Akola Khattak, which is not true. There's no record at the Haqqaniya. I have been there so many times. And I know that he once came to Pakistan for medical treatment when he lost his right eye in fighting with the Soviet forces in Singisar village in one district of Kandahar. That was the only time, and he got treated for his eye in an ICRC hospital in Quetta. That is confirmed that he came to Pakistan. On the other occasions, if he came, we don't know about that. Maybe he came, but he did not become a refugee in Pakistan.
Okay, so that's an elaborate account in a way of why Mullah Omar would not have come to Pakistan. So Intizar Khadim, what's your sense of the biography? As Rahimullah Yousafzai is saying, except for once, Mullah Omar, there's no known visit by Mullah Omar to Pakistan. However, after the US invasion of Afghanistan, there was a sense, and it was constantly being said, that he had crossed over into Pakistan, and now we have this biography which tells us that that did not happen. What was the sense in Afghanistan? Do you have any personal information with reference to Mullah Omar staying in Afghanistan and not wanting to come to Pakistan?
Well, for the time being, I think it will be unjust to tag Mullah Omar back to Pakistan. Definitely, there has been a lot of allegation against Pakistan that they were harboring the top Taliban leadership, and they have been playing good role or bad role in supporting Taliban or maybe destroying the leadership of Taliban in 2001 after the recall of Musharraf, the bad Taliban and the good Taliban. So, I mean, we cannot talk that whether Pakistan were harboring Taliban leadership or not. But
no, I'm talking about Mullah Omar. I think let's confine ourselves to my question.
Yes.
My question is that there was a lot of misinformation with reference to Mullah Omar having crossed over into Pakistan, and now we have a fairly definitive account which says that he never did.
Yes. Okay, I was coming back to this question because there was a needed context for that. Now, the Taliban who are hosted by the Afghan government in Kabul, or maybe some of the reconciled Taliban who are the top leadership, including Mullah Salam Zaif, who have been residing in Kabul, they're denying this part because they're saying that Mullah Omar have been a very patriotic person. He has been in Kabul, in Afghanistan, he has been in Kabul. I just met 2 days ago with one of the senior advisors for President Ghani, who have been quoted in that book. He said that I'm still stick on my own ground. He said that, yes, Mullah Omar has been in Afghanistan. He did not cross the border to Pakistan. And he has been a person you can count on him based on leadership. And some other people say that Mullah Omar was thinking that if he crossed the border to Pakistan, the grip he had was the leadership against, the leadership of the foot soldiers in Afghanistan. He would lose that part. So for that reason, he was trying to stay in Afghanistan. He wanted to lead some of the faction of Taliban to fight against the international community, the Afghan government. So personally, I do not know exactly because I have not been witness of that. But people who have a grip of that type of information, they deny that Mullah Omar had been in Pakistan. The book is authentic, and all the things that have been quoted regard to the residence of Mullah Omar in Afghanistan, that was authentic, inaccurate, and correct.
Okay, thank you. That was Ejaz Haider to us, and he also confirmed that people within Afghanistan in the know of things, they insist that Mullah Omar never crossed over into Pakistan. Rupert Stone, you've done a lot of work while being in Afghanistan, reported on Afghanistan. What was your sense before Mullah Omar's death, whether he was in Afghanistan, whether he had crossed over into Pakistan?
Well, it had already been, it had already come out that he probably didn't study at the Haqqaniya in Pakistan. And recent research has shown that actually most of the Pakistan leadership, the old guard, didn't study in Pakistani madrasas. The bulk of their education was in Afghanistan. So personally, I'm not really surprised by this. I think certain parties in Afghanistan and also in the US have exaggerated the relationship between Pakistan and the Taliban. There is a relationship, but it's complicated, it's tense, nuanced. And the Taliban are, at the end of the day, Afghans. They're not Pakistanis. So I'm really not particularly surprised by this. And I think we should add that the people who've denied the findings in this report haven't really given any substantive evidence to counter its claims. So their case is a little bit tenuous, I feel.
That's correct. I was going through some of those reports. But what is your sense? Was there was a lot of insistence on the part of the U.S. intelligence people and also various analysts that Mullah Omar had crossed over into Pakistan. There was also an attempt to play down the fact that immediately after the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan, the efforts by the Pakistani intelligence agencies in terms of hunting down the Taliban and capturing them and actually handing them over to the Americans, that was also played down. What possibly could be the reason for that?
Well, you're saying the Pakistani efforts to arrest Taliban were played down by the Americans?
Yes, by the Americans and various other Western reports.
I'm not sure. I mean, they certainly did conduct some high-profile arrests of Taliban. I mean, as you know, I mean, Mullah Zaif was arrested and sent to Guantanamo Bay, and he, I mean, if you read his memoirs, it's replete with vitriolic denunciations of Pakistan. And that memoir alone doesn't exactly bespeak a close tie between Pakistan and the Taliban. I mean, I think the Americans increasingly started blaming Pakistan for the problems in Afghanistan, but that came a bit later, more from around 2006, 2007. I think the first public accusations from American officials started coming out. I mean, this was at the time the insurgency was hotting up. And obviously that's increased, and the Afghans have been especially firm in their criticisms of Pakistan. So it's something that's escalated over time.
Okay. Rahimullah Yousafzai, what is your sense? I mean, same question in terms of was it a deliberate attempt to shift the burden towards Pakistan? Was it for political strategic reasons on the part of the US and the US-led coalition?
I think it was always a deliberate attempt. The U.S., was trying to hide its own shortcomings. I don't deny that Taliban did not come to Pakistan. They came and, they stayed here, many of them. and they are still, some of them are here. But the fact remains that, Taliban fighters were always in Afghanistan. They were waging a war, they were capturing territory, and now finally we have all these confirmations that they control nearly half the country. So the fighters, the commanders, they were always there. Some of the Shura members kept coming and going. That's a fact. But, let me tell you one thing, Ejaz. When the Americans were hunting down Mullah Omar, they published, a lot of leaflets, and they put a picture of Mullah Omar on that. I remember they also, produced matchboxes on which the picture of Mullah Omar was published along with the head money, and they were inviting people to give information to the U.S. and claim this bounty. They put the wrong picture on the matchboxes and the advertisement. So not Mullah Omar. It was Mullah Hafizullah who actually came to me also, and he kept going to the media in Kabul also. He was a protocol officer in the Afghan Foreign Ministry, and he was saying that after the publication of my pictures, that I'm Mullah Omar, everybody is looking at me really curiously, and he said he is now fearing that he will be killed or captured. So the Americans did not even have the correct pictures of Mullah Omar. And maybe one of the reasons was that Mullah Omar allowed himself to be photographed after he became the leader of Taliban. But his old pictures were available, including the one in which, when he wanted to come to Pakistan to seek treatment at the ICRC hospital.
So the one picture that Rahim
did not have his latest pictures, and they were looking for the wrong guy. And I'm not surprised that, Mullah Omar was living very close to a U.S. base in Zabul. In fact, the book says he was living at two places. Yeah. We always knew about this story of Mullah Jabbar. Mullah Jabbar, giving refuge to Mullah Omar in his house. And we always knew about this messenger, the courier, who was going to the Shura and to Mullah Omar and bringing, his messages, written messages, audio messages, and finally verbal messages, because, he was becoming very, very, concerned about his security. So these stories were known, but now this is a confirmation coming, from a very, well-known Dutch journalist. I know this is not going to be accepted, this narrative, but I think this is now one of the main narratives, and it's completely different in what has been said all these years.
Absolutely. But tell me something, since you met Mullah Omar several times, the one picture that is normally put out of his, it's a very grainy kind of picture. Is that the right picture, or is that also not Mullah Omar?
We have, say, two pictures. One picture is when he was a young man and, he was injured, and before the injury and after the injury. Those kind of pictures are available. But this picture which you are mentioning, that is when Mullah Omar had called a big meeting of mullahs, of ulama. In fact, I was there in that meeting in Kandahar. And the BBC guy, the cameraman who took the picture, I actually facilitated him to take that picture from a distance, because Taliban were not allowing pictures, and he was desperate to get a picture. He was a cameraman,
Yeah.
And then we went behind that audience, that big meeting. And from there, from a distance, with a lens, he took this picture. Just when Mullah Omar was, taking possession of the Kharqa Sharif. Kharqa Sharif is the shirt of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And, there was a drought. There was a lot of emergencies in Afghanistan. And the belief was that you take out this shirt and, you You show it to the people, people gather there, they kiss it, and then the belief was that those difficult times would be over. So that was the occasion. And we can see one person, he is holding his shirt and Mullah Omar is also touching it. And I was just there on the stage at that time. And I had directed this TV people, the BBC people who could not take pictures, to try and take one from a distance, which they did. That picture is available. It is Mullah Omar, yes. But it's a grainy picture, not very clear. But I think that, maybe one of the reasons why he was able to survive, say, for 13 years, almost 13 years after the fall of Taliban regime was that he was, he did not have the latest pictures, and secondly, did not come to Pakistan. I believe that if he had come to Pakistan, maybe he could have been captured or killed.
Absolutely. Easily. So the moral of the story is that one should not have too many pictures taken or not have an Instagram account. But let's move on to the reasons for the Kabul government of President Ashraf Ghani to cast aspersions on Ambassador Khalilzad's person. That's an important issue, and let me go back to Rupert Stone on that. Rupert, what do you think of what these tweets by Josh Rogin and what Hamdullah Mohib said about the talks?
Well, I mean, the striking comments and very undiplomatic and potentially self-destructive, given that the Afghan government's so dependent on the US for support. But this has been simmering for some time. The Afghan government's increasingly frustrated that they've been, as they see it, cut out of the negotiations in Qatar with the Taliban. So I suppose this outburst is just a culmination of that simmering frustration.
But the thing is that, the U.S. delegation is trying its best to get the Taliban in the next phase to also sit together with the Afghan political opposition, including perhaps informally representatives of the Kabul government, in order for, to have a broader kind of framework. And that seems to suggest that there could be the possibility of a provisional government or an interim government. And it seems to me that no one in the national unity government is particularly comfortable with the idea, because they seem to think that they would be losing power. On the other hand, Hamid Karzai and his affiliates seem to have positioned themselves for something that will come out of this. Is that sense correct? Would you agree with me?
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, the Afghan government, President Ghani, have spoken out very firmly against the notion of an interim government because he would lose power, he wouldn't be able to seek re-election, and also it might empower some of his political opponents, like former President Karzai. I mean, I think it needs to be said that the Afghan National Security Advisor insinuated that Ambassador Khalilzad was basically attempting a power grab, and that he was a sort of rogue diplomat who is controlling these negotiations to his own advantage so he could seize power in Afghanistan. I mean, this is just an absurd conspiracy theory. I mean, everyone knows that Khalilzad is representing the US government and he's abiding by US policy. And furthermore, that this sequencing of the negotiations isn't his choice. I mean, it's something that the Taliban has insisted on for years, that they talk to the Americans first before proceeding to any kind of intra-Afghan dialogue and resolve the issues of the troop withdrawal and these foreign terrorist organizations in Afghanistan first. And the US has now capitulated, really, to following the Taliban's this preferred schedule. So that's what's going on here. It's nothing to do with Khalilzad attempting a coup in Kabul.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, and to quote Josh again, where he is quoting Mohib, he says, this is the part where Hamdullah Mohib says Khalilzad is doing stuff Trump won't like. And then he goes on to quote Mohib directly. I don't think the president has instructed to delegitimize the Afghan government. I don't think the president has instructed to disrespect the Afghan people, unquote. So it seems that Mohib's broadside is directed more towards Khalilzad's person than the US attempt to talk to the Taliban.
Yes, exactly. And I just don't see that as convincing. I mean, the current framework the negotiations are taking just isn't some improvisation of Ambassador Khalilzad. I mean, this has been, this has been the Taliban demand for years. And if that's what the Afghan National Security Advisor is trying to do, to sort of win over Trump and peel him away from Khalilzad, I mean, I don't see that happening. I mean, the expert American diplomats on this issue have already, certainly some have already said on Twitter, he's following US government policy. He's not going rogue.
Okay. Thank you, Rupert Stone, for talking to us. We're going to short break, and at the other end of the break, we will continue with our discussion of what the Kabul government intends to do with Hamdullah Mohib's comments, but also then go on to discuss the Kartarpur Sahib corridor talks, which were held yesterday. Stay with us. Welcome back to Indus Special. I'm quickly going to go to Rahimullah Yousafzai and get his comments on Hamdullah Mohib's tirade against Khalilzad, and then move on to a discussion on the talks about the Kartarpur Sahib corridor. Rahimullah Yousafzai, what do you think of Hamdullah Mohib's comments?
The knives are out. Earlier, they were doing it indirectly. They were raising questions about, Zalmay Khalilzad's tactics and the way he's conducting talks with Taliban. Now, whatever Hamdullah Mohib is saying is the same as the views of President Ashraf Ghani and Dr. Abdullah. They're not saying it themselves, but they are saying it through the National Security Advisor, a young man who was the ambassador earlier to the US, and now he has replaced Hanif Atmar, who is contesting as one of the main candidates against Ashraf Ghani. I think that, the Afghan government is very angry because they have been kept out of the talks, very angry with Khalilzad as well, with Pakistan, and even with Qatar, because they think that if they try more, they can get the Afghan government into the negotiations.
So the Afghan government is planning to play the spoiler now.
Particularly were always trying to get the Taliban to agree to talk directly with the Afghan government. In fact, after every meeting, he was going, to Kabul. Before and after every meeting, he reported whatever happened to the Afghan government. Taliban were upset with all this. They were saying that is Khalilzad and the U.S. Special Envoy, or is he part of the Afghan government?
Absolutely.
They were also not happy about all this. Because
thank you so much, Rahimullah Yousafzai, for your perspective on this. We now move on to the Kartarpur Sahib corridor. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson, Dr. Mohammad Faisal, has said that Pakistan and India held quote-unquote positive talks in a conducive environment on the draft agreement of Kartarpur corridor connecting Gurdwara Darbar Sahib in Pakistan's Norawal district with Dera Baba Nanak in India's Gurdaspur. Dr. Faisal led the talks that were held at Atari on the Indian side of the border. The next round will be held on 2nd April. To discuss this, we have with us former Air Vice Marshal Shahzad Chaudhry. Marshal Chaudhry, thank you so much. So we have just had 2 military rounds. And now, of course, there have been talks. And the Indians have been pretty custard about that, frankly, in the sense that when we actually offered the Kartarpur Sahib corridor opening, Sidhu was viciously attacked in the Indian media. But I think finally Delhi realized that this is an emotional religious issue for the Sikhs. And if they do not go along, then their own Sikh community will not be particularly pleased with them. So very reluctantly, this is happening. How do you juxtapose the military round with this movement? Because I think Delhi has made it very clear that this has got no connection whatsoever with overall tenor of relations between India and Pakistan.
Yeah, interesting and quite pleasant surprise, I think, because of the fact that where we were a couple of weeks back, we seem to have still found some sort of a chance to meet together at delegations level and work out on something that you mentioned was of crucial importance to a very important minority of India. I think
and us also.
Us also.
Yeah.
And I think it was to begin with a very fine initiative taken by the government of Pakistan, offering such free corridor from India into Pakistan across the border, and practically ceding away a space of land and saying that the Sikhs have the freedom to travel to their second holiest place of the three holiest places, one that was just visible but not within their reach. So in that sense, it was a very good initiative, and I think it will have its impact as far as at least a part of India is concerned. Whether the Indian government's or Delhi's heart is in it is another matter. And as you mentioned that they've identified this as a fact that this doesn't reflect on the broader Indo-Pakistan. They're in a bind. They cannot refuse it, and they cannot deny it. And you mentioned the reason for that. But still, I would say there are three aspects to it that perhaps we may like to keep an eye on as we proceed on this. Of course, one is the political side. On the political side, the decision-making, the meeting together, by coming to agreements on how things will be done, how they'll be arranged, who will be responsible for what. And then there's a logistical side of it. Yes. And the logistic side, of course, has a lot of groundwork to do. And thirdly is the functional side, when it finally happens and they begin to talk and move from one place to the other. Now, there is a lot of slip anywhere in all these three things. Yeah. Perhaps less on the logistical side, because I think that will be something that will be done by Pakistan.
We have already built some infrastructure on our side.
That is true. Yeah. But I think in the political side, because, you know, a small little thing which goes up in the air or something happens between India and Pakistan, India finds it very convenient to pin it on Pakistan, as happened at Pulwama, unfortunately, and that was that got blown up into almost a near war. So that is, I hope it doesn't happen. But if there is a reason, then, and if Delhi's heart is not in it, you'll find that a smallest particle, or smallest pretext, they will say probably, you know, there'll be some reason of some obstruction and hindrance to the entire process.
I would tend to agree with you, because if situation at some point becomes really bad, there is obviously a possibility of they're doing this. But I have a sense that if they have, you know, agreed to the scheduled meeting, even after the military rounds, I think they are kind of creating a disconnect between this particular issue and the rest of it.
Ejaz, I feel that, I hope not, but, you know, something happens in Punjab, something happens to the Sikhs, abroad or here or wherever, I don't know.
False flag maybe?
Yeah, something like that, you know, and it can be reason enough for them to totally break off and say, well, Pakistan could not take care of you, Pakistan could not assure that the Sikh community or the Sikh visitors or wherever. After all, they keep coming to Dera Nanak Sahib, Guru Nanak's place of burial quite frequently, every year practically, and perhaps even otherwise. So Pakistan has to be very careful in terms of how we take care of our Sikh visitors, whether they're coming from Canada or the UK or from India, and make sure that they're well looked after. And there is no reason or no possibility for anyone to play dirty in that entire process. So Pakistan, while we are very hopeful of the entire thing going through, we got to also keep in mind that there are possibilities. There could be some slips here and there. And as far as the Pakistani government is concerned, at all levels, politically, logistically, functionally, we must make sure that everything is almost picture perfect in terms of not leaving a loophole.
No, I totally agree with you, because I think one aspect of, call it what you will, hybrid war or fifth generation or whatever, fourth generation, is not just a contest of arms, direct contest of arms. There can be covert actions, there can be a number of other things in and through which perceptions can be created, and then, you know, they can take it up. And I think the Modi-Doval duo have made it fairly clear on more than one occasion that they are ready to play the covert game.
Absolutely.
I mean, they are already doing it in Balochistan and elsewhere, but they could start doing that in the Punjab heartland.
Ejaz, the biggest concern that I have is to enact something, or God forbid something happens, which can raise questions in the minds of the Sikhs, and especially the Indian Sikhs, about Pakistan, and say, well, maybe we can wait a little and not push our government into making sure that this particular corridor actually becomes functional as early as it is deemed to. So in that sense, I think that's the worry as far as I'm concerned.
And I will connect this point that you're raising with the fact that the Khalistani Sikhs are obviously going to object to that, which Delhi will then begin to connect with Pakistan's support for the Khalistani Sikhs and create that kind of perception within the minds of the Indian Sikhs. So you're absolutely right. We have to play this, in a deft way, and this has to be picture perfect. But let me also take advantage of your presence here. You, as a former fighter pilot and also someone who held senior positions in the command and planning structure of the Pakistan Air Force, what we have seen here really is the PF performance. So one of the questions that people have been asking me about the morning of 26th February is that, okay, so how come this particular sortie we could not detect? There were stories about they having, sending 2 decoy sorties which were intercepted by our combat air patrols, but then there was a third which was the main mission. So the question really is that if you got the airwalks and if you got the high and low radar network, why was it that we could not detect them until they crossed over? Now, we do not even know how much they crossed over because there are different versions of the story, even from the Indian side. One is that they came all the way, and the other was that they used a standoff strike thing with the glide bombs and all. What is your sense of what happened? And so how would you, as a former fighter pilot, respond to the question of whether we were slow in responding or whether our response was okay?
Okay, first thing that these were glide bombs. These were glide bombs, and they did not come more than 6 nautical miles inside the Pakistani territory. Now that amounts to something like maybe a couple of minutes time presence in the Pakistani airspace. So that's the amount of time.
We're talking about the Pakistani airspace or the Azad Kashmir airspace?
The Azad Kashmir airspace.
The Azad Kashmir.
So that is the amount of time that they spent in, let's say, the airspace which is meant to be under our control, and where we are liable to contest any incursion, and that includes the LOC as well. As far as why the one particular element of the Indian force managed to get in, one, I think on the offense, whenever you're on the offensive, you always
have the element of surprise.
The initiative is with you. And you can actually choose the point that you want to enter from. Exactly the same way that the Pakistani Air Force did the next morning and went in and did, despite the entire Indian Air Force being up at that time, but they could not stop the Pakistani offensive. So offensive is easier in many ways to undertake. If it is well planned, well orchestrated, you're able to do it. So that is one. Secondly, perhaps it's impossible to detect every possible point from where an incursion could be made. So they had a couple of areas covered, but possibly not this as well covered.
So I'm happy you brought this point up. So give us the science of, and I've been in my own sort of, layperson's way, I was trying to explain to people the limitations of radar coverage and the rest of it. But give us a better sense of, especially in a mountainous terrain, a radar performance can be impacted by a number of factors. If you could explain that.
Ejaz, just one more thing. I think I must add to what I perhaps needed to say to your earlier question. Threat perception is also an important part, and you envisage that these are the likely targets. Now, was there a possibility that this particular target where the attack took place wasn't recognized as a target? Maybe it wasn't a target. That's another possibility. In fact, one of the questions that came to my mind after all this had gone through was the fact that they had not hit anything. They had just hit the trees and the ground, and that's about it, and the hills on the sides of the rocks. And I said, was it a deliberate let into the to Modi to save face within his own country? That's the first thought that came to my mind. And then obviously we learned, we were wiser later that no, that was not the case. So I think more importantly, the reaction that was taken, the time available to reach that point, to intercept someone, was a little longer than what the time that they spent in
So to translate what you were saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I want the viewers to understand this, that in terms of using both aerial platforms as well as ground air defense, one has a list of possible vulnerable areas and points, and then the assets are basically allocated for their defense accordingly. Now, in the event that some other place is hit, or a mission comes in to hit that place which is not on that list, then it is difficult to defend that immediately.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, every inch of our airspace is sacred.
Correct.
In terms of its need to be defended. So I think that's very essential. That's established. But the fact is that it's impossible for any air force in the world.
Correct.
The Indians could not do it the next morning. So
there was this guy who actually flew into Moscow's Red Square with despite all the radar coverage.
One guy landed in Washington in front of the White House, on the highway there. So there are all kinds of stories. Well, that's one possibility, and of course that is a possibility always for someone to sneak in and do something funny or silly. So that's one. But secondly, it's almost impossible to secure every. That is why the concept of quid pro quo. You hit me, I'll hit you twice as hard.
Correct.
So that's the sense that you employ in terms of the air operations. But despite that, I think you always get wiser after the event, and you realize that there could have been a wider understanding of what all could possibly emerge, how it can happen, and then ensure that you have assets closer by where the reactions times are not as long.
Absolutely.
So I think all of us learn our lessons.
So I have to wrap up the segment also, but I really want to ask you this. Of course, we downed the MiG-21. The wreckage is on our side. We captured the pilot. But apparently, we also hit one of the flankers. Now, why are we not coming out with that Sioux hit? I mean, surely the gun camera must have recorded that. So the Indians are constantly talking about shooting down an F-16, which obviously they can't produce except for the claim that they're making. But we have clearly said, as a policy statement, the floor of the House, the foreign minister has talked about 2 hits, the MiG-21 and the flanker. So MiG-21, yes, it can be seen by the world. Why not the flanker?
I think one of the reasons is that the shot was a long-range shot.
Okay.
It was beyond visual range kind of a shot which was undertaken. So secondly, all that you see is on your scope, on the radar scope, a target, which is a blip like any other MiG-21 and the aeroplane, the other aeroplane, or any other airplane would give a similar blip. But what you do realize is that you get electronic data along with that one particular blip or target on your radar screen, which will tell you what kind of target it is. Okay. Secondly, how we got confirmed of a second shot was, or second kill was, when the poor lady on the other side, the wife, the widow of that particular pilot who died, came out, and there were her shots which were shared on the social media in terms of the, her sort of grief on the death of her husband. And so that told us that actually a second aeroplane had gone down. So when that went down and we had this, you recreate the situation as to how the intercepts took place, how the enemy was coming in and where you were and how you locked on one. One guy got one, the second guy locked onto the other one and fired a missile, the pieces of which were shown by the Indians of the AIM-120 or whatever they were trying to portray over there as a weapon. God knows whether that was even fired or not, whether that belonged to Pakistan or not. But the fact that that was shot, it actually indicated to you that there was a shot that was taken at the second aeroplane. There was a widow, unfortunately, that got affected by that particular thing. She lost her husband. And so therefore, there was a possibility of a second aeroplane. Now, whether it had a rear seater or not is $1 million question. And you and I must keep working to try and find that out.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marshal Chaudhry. We were talking about, of course, the Kartarpur Sahib corridor also, but I decided to make use of his presence and also get his perspective on the aerial combat that we saw in the second military round. This is all for today and for this week from Indus Special. We shall see you next week. Until then, it's goodbye.